People of Sparks, Chapter 14, What Torin Did. All day after Casper and Maddie left, Miss Myrtle wondered where Lena was. Had the doctor sent her on an errand, she asked. But the answer was no. Did Torin know where she was? He said he didn't know and he didn't care, thinking maybe Lena had gone to the Pioneer Hotel to see Dune. Miss Myrtle walked down there, but no one had seen her. By evening, when Lena was still missing, Miss Myrtle was very worried. She found a note in her book that night. She frowned as she read it. This didn't seem like a good idea to her. It was one of Lena's rash, impulsive acts, and probably it was dangerous. Miss Myrtle went downstairs, knocked on the doctor's door, and showed her the note. "Can we send someone after them?" she said, "to bring her back?" But the doctor shook her head. "They're a whole day ahead," she said. "No one could catch up, even if you could find someone willing to go." So Miss Myrtle went back to bed and tried to sleep. She told herself that Lena had survived many dangers before, but still she lay awake worrying most of the night. In the morning at breakfast, Torin asked where Lena was, and Miss Myrtle told him. He jumped up from his chair. He threw down his piece of bread, which bounced on the table. "She went with them." "She went with them?" he cried. "She went with Casper?" "Calm down," said Dr. Hester. "No," yelled Torin. "I won't calm down. I hate her. I hate all of you cave people. Why did you have to come here and ruin everything?" With a furious swipe of his hand, he knocked over Miss Myrtle's cup of tea. He kicked backwards at his chair, which fell over, and he ran out of the room. Through the window, Miss Myrtle saw him racing across the courtyard and out the gate. "Jealous," said the doctor. "He wants Casper all to himself. Heaven knows why." "That boy craves attention," said Miss Myrtle. "I doubt that he cares who it comes from." "I suppose you're right," said the doctor, looking at Miss Myrtle with faint surprise. Torin sped down the river road, full of boiling rage. He was the one who should be sitting beside Casper, not that fat Maddie and not that stupid cave girl. He should be there, riding on the truck, going away to be a roamer. But she had snuck off and done it instead, and he hated her for it. It was the worst thing that had happened to him in his whole life. He ran a long way, his feet pounding the dusty road, his fists pumping back and forth. Furious tears streaming down his face. When he stopped panting, he was way out in the tomato field, not far from the wind tower, where he had been the day the cave people came over the hill. He remembered how they had looked, like a swarm of horrible insects coming down toward the village. Now the cave people had settled in as if they were going to stay forever. They were eating food that should belong to Sparks people. They were wearing clothes that Sparks people had given them. They walked around in the streets of Sparks as if they belonged here. Torin wanted them gone. He stomped among the tomato plants, throwing punches in the air. "Get out of here, get out," he cried, as if Lena and all the Emberites were there to hear him. His thoughts were like flames inside his head. He kept seeing Casper on the seat of the truck with Maddie on one side of him and Lena on the other. The feeling that went with this picture was like a sharp stick in his stomach. If only he had one of those giant bombs that they had in the old days. He imagined they were about the size of watermelons. He would shoot one at Lena. Pow! It would sail halfway to the city and drop right on Casper's truck and blow them all up. Then he would shoot another one at the Pioneer Hotel. Blam! It would flatten the building and blow up every one of the cave people. He longed to throw that big bomb. He could almost feel it in his hands. He'd come out at the end of the row of plants now, where a small whitewashed storage shed stood at the edge of the field. Crates of tomato were stacked nearby, ready to be distributed. Without thinking, Torin grabbed a tomato from the nearest crate and hurled it against the wall of the shed. It splattered. Red water dripped from the white wall. It felt so good to do this that he did it again. In a fury, he snatched up one tomato after another. Wham, wham, wham. He flung them with all his might until the window of the shed splintered. The wall was a bleeding mess, and a long mound of broken red flesh lay on the ground. He stopped and took a breath. What would the farmers think when they saw this? 2 whole crates of tomatoes smashed. They'd be angry. But they wouldn't know he had done it, would they? No, no one had seen him. And that was when an idea floated into Torrance' mind, a really excellent idea. He smiled thinking about it. He threw one last tomato, aiming for the dark glass-toothed hole of the broken window. There was a satisfying crash as the tomato knocked something over inside. Torrance turned and ran, but he didn't go all the way home. When Dune came through the town that morning on the way to work, he found Miss Myrtle waiting for him on the side of the road. She signaled to him with one finger, and he left the stream of workers and came over to her. "Lena has gone off," she said. "I thought you should know." Gone off? Gone off where?" Miss Myrtle produced a scrap of paper from the pocket of her skirt. Read this, she said. Dune read. He crunched up his nose in puzzlement. He remembered Lena telling him something the other day about these people, Casper and Maddie. What had she said? He tried to recall. He looked again at the note. "Something important," she said. What would that be?" Miss Myrtle shrugged her thin shoulders. "She gets these ideas in her head," she said. Dune could see that she was worried, though she didn't say so. "Well, she says she'll be back in 2 or 3 days," said Dune. "That's not so long. The odd thing is," said Miss Myrtle, "that Casper, when he left, said he wouldn't be back for several months." Dune frowned. What was Lena up to? He didn't understand it, but he didn't want to make Miss Myrtle more worried than she was. "She must have some plan for getting back," he said, handing back the note. "Of course," said Miss Myrtle briskly. She folded the note and replaced it in her pocket. "There was no need to worry. I'll have her come and find you as soon as she returns." She headed back toward the doctor's house, and Dune went toward the fields. He walked slowly to give himself time to think. He was upset about Lena. How could she be so foolish as to launch herself out into an unknown world with 2 unknown people? But in a way, he wasn't surprised. Lena was always eager to investigate new places. Look how she'd gone up to the roof of the gathering hall on the first day she became a messenger in Amber. Look how eager she'd been to go down into the pipeworks. She probably just wanted to see what's outside of Sparks. As soon as she'd satisfy her curiosity, she'd be back. But Dune was upset about Lena for another reason too, and it didn't have to do with her safety. He was upset that she had gone exploring without him. All through the last days of Amber, they'd been partners. Now she had gone off on her own, leaving him here. He was annoyed and he was hurt. He had to admit to himself that he hadn't been a very good friend to Lena lately. Maybe he'd hurt her feelings by paying so much attention to Tick, but still, it was Lena who was his partner in the important things. If she had an urgent reason for hitching a ride with Casper, why hadn't she told him? Why hadn't she asked him to come along? He trudged toward the tomato field, head down, scuffing his shoes irritably in the dust, and so he didn't notice until he was right up to it that a commotion was going on by the storage shed. Everyone was crowded around it, and Chugger, the team leader, was yelling. Dune hurried forward to see what was going on. Wasted, Sugar was shouting. 2 whole crates smashed. Who done this? And the shed plastered with muck and the windows broken. He glared at the crowd of workers. "Any of you know about this?" he demanded. "Anyone know what mad person did this?" No one said a word. Dune stared with horror at the mess on the wall. It looked gory, as if it were smashed animals instead of just tomatoes. He could feel the rage of the person who had done it. I don't like this," Chugger said darkly. "Nothing like this ever happened before you people arrived. I want it cleaned up right away. Walls washed, windows fixed, mess cleared away. Get on it." "Listen," said someone. Dune turned to see. It was Tick speaking. "We didn't do this. Don't get all tough with us." Sugar whipped around. "Who else would do this? Who else but one of you, always gripping and grumbling? But we only just got here now. How could we have done it?" Someone called out. "Besides, we wouldn't," cried someone else. "We would never waste food." More and more voices rose in protest. Dune added his, too, saying, "It wasn't us. It couldn't have been." but Chugger just stood and scolded at them. Finally, he yelled, "Quiet! Get to work!" Just after that, Dune heard running footsteps behind him and turned to see Torin racing across the field. He was shouting in his shrill, high voice as he came. "I saw," he cried, waving his arms. "Last night I was out here, and I saw." He ran into the midst of the workers and stood panting, his little eyes wild. "I heard a thump, 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 so I snuck up to see, and I did see." "Well then," Sugar said, "what did you see?" I saw who threw the tomatoes. I saw who made that big mess and broke the window." He stood with his neck poked forward and in his skinny arms held tight to his sides. His whole body was trembling with excitement. His eyes scanned the group of workers. "It was him," he shrieked, pointing straight at Dune. "It was him that did it. I saw him." Dune was so shocked he couldn't make a sound. He stood with his mouth open, staring at Torin. Around him, a few people spoke up. "He did not," said someone. "He couldn't have. Anyway, he wouldn't." "No," someone else said. "He would never do that." But Chugger seized his arms and pulled him roughly aside. "What do you have to say for yourself? Is this your doing?" Dune shook his head. "No," he said. "No, that boy is lying. And why would he do that? Why would he take the trouble to come out here first thing in the morning and to point to you and lie?" "I don't know," said Dune. Chugger released his arm with a push. "I'll be keeping a special eye on you from now on," he said. "But why?" said Dune. "I didn't do this." How do I know that?" said Chugger. "It's your word against mine, and he's one of us."